All right, so you want to dive deep into the world of Sam Altman, see what he's up to with his investments and how he's thinking about AI these days.
Sounds like a plan.
And you haven't made it easy on us. We've got excerpts from a biography about Altman, some recent news articles, and even transcripts from two big interviews.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's going to be fun, though, trying to understand not just his investment portfolio, which, by the way, is massive, but to get into his head, see what makes him tick.
The challenge is his views on AI, they're not always straightforward. Sometimes they even seem kind of contradictory.
Well, that's what makes this so interesting, right? He's at the forefront of building the future of AI, but he's also wrestling with the potential downsides.
Yeah.
It's like he's got this front row seat to this crazy ride, and he's trying to figure out how to steer it.
Exactly. And I think his investment portfolio offers some clues about how he sees things playing out. It shows us what he's betting on, where he thinks the real opportunities are.
So let's talk about this portfolio. Over 400 companies, valued at something like $2.8 billion. Some of these companies are actually ones that OpenAI, the company Altman leads, does business with. That has to raise some questions, right?
For sure. I mean, is there a potential conflict of interest there? It's something that both Altman and OpenAI have addressed. They say they manage it transparently, but it's something we need to keep in mind as we go deeper into this.
Okay, good point. So beyond the sheer size of this portfolio, what strikes you about Altman's investment strategy? Like, what are the themes? What's he looking for in these companies?
Well, first off, it's incredibly diverse. You've got energy, biotech, aerospace. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
He's clearly not just chasing quick profits. It seems more like he's betting on technologies that he thinks will reshape the world in a big way.
It's like he's trying to build the future he wants to see.
Right. And that future isn't some far-off thing. It's being built right now, piece by piece. Another thing that's interesting is how many of his investments are in what you might call deep tech. These are areas that require big scientific breakthroughs, years of research and development.
So he's not afraid to take risks.
No, not at all. It seems like he's actually drawn to these super challenging problems, which, by the way, lines up perfectly with his whole idea that AI is going to revolutionize scientific discovery.
That's right. He sees AI as the key to unlocking those big breakthroughs we need in medicine, energy, materials, everything.
And he's not just talking about it. He's putting his money where his mouth is, investing in companies that are building the tools and platforms to make it happen.
But before we go too far into the future, let's talk about where Altman sees AI right now. He seems to think that even something like GPT-4, which most people find mind-blowing, is just a small step on a much longer journey.
Yeah, he's actually described current AI models as mildly embarrassing, which is funny, but also kind of makes you think, right?
A little bit.
Like, what does he know that we don't? He's got this great analogy about Bill Gates and early computers. Back then, Gates underestimated how much memory computers would need.
So even someone like Bill Gates got it wrong.
Totally. Altman's point is that we constantly underestimate how fast technology grows, especially when it's growing exponentially.
So AI isn't just getting better, it's getting better at a faster and faster rate.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of Altman's big ideas, which is iterative deployment. He's a big believer in releasing AI gradually, step by step, so society can adapt as the technology develops.
Instead of just unleashing it all at once.
Yeah, it's like releasing a new software program and getting feedback before you launch the next version, but on a much bigger scale. With AI, the stakes are way higher.
Right, you're not just trying to fix a few bugs, you're trying to make sure that this incredibly powerful technology doesn't backfire in some way that we haven't even thought of yet.
Exactly. And I think that leads us perfectly into our next part of this deep dive. We need to talk about those potential dangers Altman keeps talking about and see what he proposes we do about them.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so let's dive into some of Altman's, well, bolder predictions, I guess you could say, about AI and its future. He doesn't just think AI is going to change things. He thinks it'll be like as essential as energy is today.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement. Makes you think about how electricity changed everything, right?
Yeah.
How we work, how we live, pretty much everything. Is that what he's getting at?
That's exactly it. He thinks the need for computing power, the brains behind AI, it's going to keep growing like crazy as the cost of that computing power goes down and as people find more and more ways to use it.
So it's not just AI getting better and cheaper, it's that the more we use it, the more uses we find for it.
Exactly. It just keeps feeding itself. And that brings us back to, remember his fascination with nuclear fusion?
Yeah, I was wondering how that fit in.
Well, it all ties together. He sees fusion as the answer to the energy crisis that could happen if everyone starts using AI all the time.
Makes sense. Okay, so even if fusion does become a thing, how does Altman see AI actually changing the world? Like, what are the big things he's excited about?
Scientific discovery, for one. He thinks AI could completely change how we do research. Imagine breakthroughs in medicine, new materials, better ways to understand climate change, even space exploration.
So instead of spending decades researching a cure for a disease, AI could help us find it way faster.
Exactly. Like, what if we could crack the code for some of these problems in years instead of decades?
That would be incredible. But also, a lot of power, right? And I remember we talked about how Altman's worried about AI being misused, like for weapons or something like that.
We did, and that's where his own experience with the OpenAI board drama comes in. Remember when they tried to kick him out?
Yeah, that was a whole thing.
Well, it shows that even people with good intentions can end up fighting over power. And with AI, the stakes are so high.
So it's not just about stopping bad guys from using AI for bad things. It's about making sure even the good guys don't mess things up by accident.
Right. It's about having rules and being transparent and careful, which takes us right back to his idea about iterative deployment, releasing AI a little bit at a time, seeing what happens, and adjusting as we go.
It's like you're experimenting, but with the whole world as your lab.
Kind of, yeah. And it shows that Altman's not afraid to change his mind, to learn as we go. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
Which is kind of refreshing, you know? A lot of people in tech act like they know everything.
Totally. Speaking of people in tech, I think it's time we talk more about Altman himself, what makes him tick, how he thinks about humans in this whole AI future.
Definitely. One thing I keep thinking about is jobs. Like, is AI going to put everyone out of work?
It's a big concern, but Altman doesn't think so. He doesn't buy into that whole robots taking over thing.
So he's not worried about robots stealing all the jobs?
Not really. He sees AI more like a tool, something that can help us do things better. Like, imagine AI helping you brainstorm ideas or analyze data really fast, or even personalize your education.
So instead of robots replacing us, it'll be more like they're working with us, each doing what they're best at.
Right, and Altman thinks humans will always find new ways to create and contribute, no matter what technology comes along.
That's a pretty hopeful way to look at it. But what about him? How does he use AI in his own life?
He talks about using it as a brainstorming partner, like bouncing ideas off of it, and as a reading companion, helping him understand complex stuff.
Huh, so it's like having a super smart friend who's always there to help you think.
Exactly. And it shows he's not just talking about this stuff, he's actually using it himself, which is kind of cool.
It is. So we've talked about AI, we've talked about Altman, but there's one more big thing we need to unpack. Remember that crazy idea we talked about earlier? The simulation hypothesis? I'm still not sure what to make of it, and I'm curious what Altman thinks about it, especially with all his work on AI.
It's a mind-bending concept, for sure. The idea that we might be living in a super advanced computer program. And Altman's work on AI, especially with things like those realistic videos Google's making with Sora, well, makes you wonder.
Yeah, it's like if we can create these realistic worlds inside computers, how do we know we're not already in one? Makes you think, right?
It really does. And Altman doesn't pretend to know the answer, but he thinks it's a serious question, something we should be thinking about. And he believes that AI, even if it doesn't give us the answer, it'll help us understand reality better.
It's like AI is a tool to help us figure out what's real and what's not.
Right. And maybe even more than that, it's making us think about what real even means, which is pretty crazy.
Totally. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I do want to come back to something more concrete. Altman's own experience with that whole OpenAI board thing, it seems like that really changed how he thinks about, like, the dangers of AI and how to control it.
For sure. I mean, here's this guy. He's leading the charge into the future of AI, and suddenly his own board tries to push him out.
Right, it was a big deal. He said okay at first, but then he fought back and ended up back in charge.
And that tells you something, right?
Yeah.
It shows that even with the best intentions, things can go wrong. Power dynamics, internal conflicts, it can happen anywhere.
So he's not just worried about bad guys misusing AI, he's worried about the good guys messing things up too.
Exactly. And that's why he's so focused on transparency, accountability, and having strong rules in place. He's learned the hard way that you can't just assume everything will be fine.
And it also ties back to his idea about releasing AI slowly, step by step, right? Like, don't just throw it all out there and see what happens.
Exactly. It's about being cautious, watching carefully, adjusting as we go. Because with something this powerful, you don't get a second chance.
And it's not just theoretical for him anymore, right? He's even said that he could be personally at risk because of his work on AI.
Yeah, that's a bit scary to think about.
For sure. I mean, when you're dealing with something that could change the world this much, it's bound to make some people nervous, even scared. But hey, let's take a break from the serious stuff for a second. I gotta ask you about this one thing that's been bugging me.
What's that?
Altman's tweets. He never uses capital
Oh,
letters.
yeah, it's like his signature thing.
Right. It's so weird, but also kind of cool.
Well, I think it says a lot about him. He's not afraid to break the rules. He cares more about what he's saying than about following some grammar rule.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, I'm doing things my way, which I guess is how he approaches everything.
Definitely. He's independent, a risk taker, always pushing the boundaries, and at the same time, he's all about open communication and collaboration.
It's a pretty unique combination. And maybe that's what you need when you're trying to build the future of AI.
Could be. But it also means not everyone's going to like him. You
Yeah.
know, some people see him as a hero, others see him as, I don't know, maybe even dangerous.
Yeah, I get that. AI is a big deal, and people are going to have strong opinions about it and about the people building it.
For sure. The important thing is to talk about it, to think about the good and the bad, to be careful, but also open-minded.
And that's what we've tried to do here, right? Dive deep into the world of Sam Altman, explore his ideas, and really think about what this all means for the future.
Absolutely. It's a complex topic, but that's what makes it so fascinating.
So, before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners out there?
Just this. If you could talk to a truly intelligent AI, like the first one, what would you ask it?
Whoa, that's a tough one. So many things. I guess maybe I'd ask how to solve climate change, or how to make sure AI doesn't turn against us, or maybe, just for fun, I'd ask it to tell me the best joke in the universe, something only a superintelligence could come up with.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
Curiosity, bit of humor. That's what we need as we face this unknown future.
Totally agree. This deep dive has been a wild ride, and I hope everyone listening has learned something, maybe even changed their mind about a few things. AI is here to stay, and it's up to all of us to figure out how to make it work for us, not against us.
Well said. And who knows? Maybe someday soon we'll be able to ask those questions to an AI and get some real answers.
That would be something else. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep your minds open to the possibilities. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.